So this is the first in our series of transitions messages, which means this is the first of our weeks of change. Preparing for my departure from this church. Week after week, people come through my door, always have since I've been here, to share what it feels like to go through loss and change. I feel like the bottom has dropped out of my life, they say. I'm not sure who I am anymore. Things are changing so fast, my head is spinning, they say. I find it easy to empathize, don't you? Yeah. Haven't we all been there? Aren't we all kind of there now? We're there together as a congregation. Each day I receive some sort of assurance that moving to my next assignment in ministry is the right thing for all of us. And yet there are moments when I feel my heart will break. I'm going to miss you guys so much. I cannot start crying now. This is a long message. With all this that this change involves, it feels like life has been turned upside down and inside out. Recently, though, I remembered something that really helped me in previous transitions. And so for probably the fourth or fifth time in the last decade, I turned to an old friend, Robert Brummett's wonderful little book, Finding Yourself in Transition. I offer it to you over these next few weeks because this is much more than a book to me. This has been a companion. It's traveled from city to city. It's gone with me to the ocean, where I fled there seeking some space for reflection and renewal. I know that some of you are not happy with my decision to leave Unity in Greensboro, and I don't blame you, because you know what? You didn't get to make the choice. And that usually does not feel good. But I hope these next few weeks of messages based on Brummett's book will help us all come to a place of greater peace and acceptance, not just for this change, but for any change that might be taking place in our lives right now. It will take willingness to let go of our stories and step back and see our transitions through spiritual eyes. But it's so worth it. For us here at Unity, if we go through this change mindfully, we could end up apart geographically, yet closer in the heart than ever. And what a blessing that would be. Brummett, who wrote Transitions while going through a very painful divorce, begins the book by sharing a dream. He writes, "I am in the house I have lived in for 16 years with my wife and 4 children. We are all smiling and seem to be enjoying each other's company. Suddenly, the house begins to shake. The walls begin to cave in, the ceiling starts to fall. In a panic, I run for the door shouting, 'Everyone, get out of the house fast!' But outside, the ground is shaking violently, and I turn and I look back just as the house collapses in a pile of rubble. Everyone in the house is killed. Everything in it is destroyed. I am shaken to the very depths of my being. Then I look up to the night sky and see millions of crystal stars looking down on me. Suddenly, I feel completely one with all that my eyes can see. In that instant, I experience simultaneously bottomless grief and infinite joy. In that moment, I know that these two, grief and joy, are brother and sister, opposite sides of the same coin." This is a perfect description of the roller coaster I've been on. 1 minute excitement and joy, the next sadness and grief. What a relief, though, it is to know that this is natural. And what a blessing it is to be able to feel it all so deeply, because this was not always the case for me. So I'm overjoyed and grateful to be feeling all that I'm feeling. Most of us fear and resist change. It often makes us angry. Who has dared to rock my boat? There's a part of us that stubbornly clings to the old and familiar. We may be puzzled to find ourselves resisting even positive change, as if our lives were at stake. But it's not really so surprising when you consider that perhaps the greatest fear most people have is fear of the unknown. And change always brings us face to face with the unknown. Theologian Paul Tillich talks about change as an ontological crisis, a condition that arises when something that has served as the ground of our being is threatened, diminished, or taken from us. This ground of being could be a relationship, a role, a job, a personal identity, or a belief system. The triggering event could be any kind of setback or loss. It could be the death of a loved one, or a divorce or illness, even the loss of a minister and a congregation. Experiences like this can feel like death itself, because every change is a type of death. Death to an old way of living and being. Yet ironically, change or dying to the old is one of the defining characteristics of growth. To live is to grow is to change is to die to the old. Jesus said to his disciples, "Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a seed. But when it dies, it bears much fruit." To resist change is to resist life. See, resistance says, this should not be happening. Something is wrong here. This is not healthy, and this is not helpful. But grief is natural and normal. It can show up in many ways. For example, over the past couple of months, I've noticed that I'm more tired than usual. I've noticed that I'm not sleeping very well and that sometimes I feel depressed. I'm also not particularly mentally sharp, in case you haven't noticed, even more forgetful than usual. Other times I feel kind of anxious and uncentered, and have found myself saying things and doing things I don't usually say or do. I notice that my feelings are hurt easily, and some days I'm absolutely irritable all day. The reason I'm telling you this is because if you're noticing any of these feelings, it might help to recognize them as symptoms of change and loss. Criticizing ourselves only makes them worse. Are you with me? You know, I'm right. But patience with the process allows us to stay open until something happens to remind us that we're in the midst of a major transition and we need to cut ourselves some slack. Got it? Yeah. I notice these reminders can come from anywhere. Like the other evening, I was packing boxes of books and feeling kind of sad in the process, and so I flipped over a book of poetry by my old friend Hafiz. Here's what the book opened to. Don't surrender your loneliness so quickly. Let it cut more deep. Let it ferment and season you as few human or even divine ingredients can. Something missing in my heart tonight has made my eyes so soft, my voice so tender, and my need of God absolutely clear. An accident? I don't think so. One of my heroes is futurist Barbara Marx Hubbard, and she writes in her book, The Evolutionary Journey, crisis precedes transformation. Before every quantum change, problems arise. Limits to growth, stagnation, unmanageable complexity, disintegration of some sort. From the perspective of the present, these crises look like mistakes, deadly errors in the system. But from a higher perspective, often with hindsight, I'm afraid, these problems are seen for what they really are: evolutionary drivers, vital stimulants which trigger astounding design innovations. That's what I think is in store for this congregation: astounding design innovations. So crisis precedes transformation, yet it does not automatically produce transformation. The crucial factor lies in the way we choose to handle it. If we run away from the pain or deny it or blame it on someone, we're simply going to suffer without ever changing and growing. By our response, we can either support our own evolution of consciousness or we can stifle it. Awareness, open-minded watchfulness is essential for transformation. The famous psychologist Carl Jung said that the psyche of each of us human beings is united by an unconscious collective memory. These memory patterns are known as archetypes. The transition process, which consists of an ending, a period of emptiness known as the void, now there's a scary word for you, and a new beginning, is a classic archetypal journey. Archetypal processes are not personal, although they're experienced in a very personal way. They do not belong to an individual, but to the entire human race, and have belonged to it since the beginning of conscious thought. I love the story of Moses and the Hebrew exodus from Egypt because I honor it as a classic story of transition. This story lives within the collective memory of the entire Judeo-Christian culture, and it lives within each one of us, whether or not we know the details of the story or not. Brummett uses it in his book, and it meant so much to me. And I hope that it'll be comforting to you as it was for me. This story helps me take a longer view and see that there is order beneath chaos, and that what I am going through, people have always gone through, that there is a higher purpose driving it all forward. Historically, it is the tale of Hebrew people escaping from a life of slavery in Egypt, crossing the arid wilderness of the Sinai Peninsula, and arriving eventually in Canaan, or the Promised Land. An ending, a void, and a new beginning. The significance of the story lies not just in the geographic escape from Egypt to Canaan, but in what took place during the journey. You see, it was not in the Promised Land, but in the wilderness that the Israelites made the transition from a nomadic tribe of refugees to a nation, to a congregation, with an identity, a deep covenant, and a true mission. This is the first thing to know about any personal transition, that the personal power lies not in arrival at any destination, but in our experience of the journey itself. This is such an important awareness to really get, especially when it comes to uncomfortable feelings. We tend to want to get through them quickly. We tend to be impatient with these. Our desire is single-minded, to be rid of the discomfort and get back to life as usual. But in this mindset, our focus is where? In the future. And with our focus in the future, it is possible to miss the transforming power of the journey itself. In fact, when we're primarily focused on feeling better, of getting ourselves together, and of feeling safe, it is probable that the soul-enriching quality of this deeply human journey from loss to new beginning will be missed. For us as a congregation, this is a time of expressing our feelings of deep love and appreciation for one another, of remembering and honoring our years together, of clearing up any remaining misunderstandings and healing any lingering hurts. With our physical time together as a congregation short, we are clear that it would not be a good idea to put off sharing and connecting. We grow as we share ourselves more authentically and feel more deeply and take more risks with one another. We grow when we step up and become the implementers of our creative ideas rather than waiting for someone else to do the work for us. So let's see what we can learn from the Exodus story. As the story opens, the Israelites are living as slaves in the land of Egypt. They're in bondage to their Egyptian overseers. But it didn't start out that way. The Israelites originally settled in Egypt in response to a food crisis nearly 400 years prior. There was famine in nearly every land, but in Egypt there was abundance, bread enough for everyone, and so the Israelites migrated to Egypt. So initially, Egypt was a godsend, literally a lifesaver. Yet what saves us at one point in our life can later on imprison us. After centuries of living in abundance in Egypt, life changed dramatically when a new king came to power. The new king came, and he was threatened by the abundance and the richness and the power of the Hebrew people. So he decided to rein them in by consigning them to lives of hard labor driven by cruel taskmasters. Now, I don't think you're going to attract a cruel taskmaster, don't get me wrong. I hope not. If you do, call me up. I'll beat him up for you. But I'm sure we've all noticed some patterns of feeling and thinking and behaving that once served and protected us, but now keep us in bondage and cause us pain. We get stuck in these familiar patterns and afraid of the unknown. And when we do, the creative call within us gets stifled when we become a prisoner of our past. Yet at the very same time, the Christ within means that there is an evolutionary drive within every one of us to move forward in new life, to move forward in a new way of thinking. I know you've all experienced this, and it's really an uncomfortable tension. That feeling that I can't stand it where I am now, but I'm afraid to move because I'm afraid of the future. So enter Moses. Moses is a Hebrew who's been raised in privilege in the house of Pharaoh. Yet he has not forgotten his Hebrew roots, and he's deeply pained by the plight of his people in Egypt. Finally, he's compelled by a relentless inner call to take action, and in a fit of rage, he kills one of the cruelest of all the overseers and has to flee for his life. In an instant, his world of abundance and material prosperity is ended, and he finds himself alone in the desert, the wilderness of Midian. He refers to himself in this period as a stranger in a strange land. And I think, what a fabulous description of this feeling, stranger in a strange land. Sometimes it's like I really don't even know who I am. There's so much change going on. I know who I was in the old familiar life. What I don't know is who I am in the new life. So while tending sheep in Midian, Moses is called by God to lead the Hebrew people out of Egypt. He resists telling God, listen, I am way inadequate for that task. We can tell that the Pharaoh inside of us, the ego, has taken charge when we begin to feel overwhelmed, when we begin to feel blown away by the changes, when we become stressed and overworked and feel like everything is up to us. There is one antidote, one we're often kind of scared of. That antidote is to feel our feelings. Get out of here altogether. Spend time here in the feeling nature. We have to get centered to remember that it's not our ego power and our intellect and all our plans and our schemes that are going to get us through. It's the power of the Christ consciousness within every one of us that's going to get us through, that's going to guide our way step by step. God promises Moses that he'll be with him throughout the entire journey. So Moses leads the people out of Egypt with Pharaoh's soldiers in hot pursuit. This old reality, though, is not forgotten. You know, have you ever had this experience where you think, thank God I've overcome that in myself. Thank God I am no longer the person who used to do that. And then a trigger comes along. The button gets pushed. And all of a sudden, I find myself being exactly the person I knew I would never be again. This is the way it goes. We have our old patterns. So here are the Israelites. They've come to the Red Sea. And now they're caught between the Egyptian army and behind them and the Red Sea in front of them. And there appears to be no hope, no way through. Caught between memories of the past, now over, and the uncertainty of the future, caught between our old self and the person we're trying to become, we may feel that regret and that hopelessness. We may even second guess our decision to change. At the edge of the sea, when the Israelites are feeling so trapped, here's what they say. It would have been better for us to stay and serve the Egyptians than to die here in this place. Tell me you don't know what they were feeling. I certainly do. I've been there recently. But Moses gives them the answer to their dilemma and to ours too. And he says something so comforting and so strengthening that it brings tears of gratitude to my eyes. I think this is probably my favorite passage in the whole scripture. He says to them, "Fear not. Stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work out for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You have only to be still. Be still." Very, very, very clear direction. Well, you know how the rest of the story goes. Moses lifts up his rod, and the Red Sea parts, and the children of Israel move across safely, and the Egyptians pursuing behind find that the sea returns in a rush and engulfs them, and they drown. The children of Israel are now free. They have navigated their ending and are ready to take the next step toward their destiny. Yes, the Exodus story is an archetypal portrayal of all change in our lives. Where we are, Egypt, the ego, is not a bad place. At times it's a very good place. But the children of Israel outgrow their circumstances, just as we outgrow the circumstances of our lives. The evolutionary call draws us forward to the promised land and a higher state of being. Like the children of Israel, When we're going through change, we might complain, we might cry, we might feel fear, we may cling to the past. But always, the Lord of our being is there right inside of us, calling us to freedom. We have to follow. I have to follow. We have to follow, even when we don't see the whole picture. We're like a little caterpillar crawling across an intricately designed oriental carpet. We see nothing but a series of colors randomly unfolding one to the other. Yet with the Moses within us, with the faith that we have, you can be assured that there will be transformation. And when there's transformation, we'll soar like the butterflies above that carpet, and from that height, what will we see? All the glory of the pattern. Holding to this broader vision, we see that our endings are not problems. They are preludes to transformation. And I want to end with this beautiful quote, one of my favorite again, from Richard Bach's Illusions. It says, "A cloud does not know why it moves in a certain direction and at a certain speed. It feels an impulse, and it follows. But the sky knows the reason and the patterns behind the clouds. And you will know, too, when you lift yourself high enough to see beyond the horizon." And that's so. That's so in my life. That's so in your life. That's so in everything that goes on in your life. So I bless you this morning. And I hope that we can be together, stay so tight together as we walk through an ending. That for some will be a joyous occasion, for others will not be. All I know is I love you guys. And I'm like this, I asked Elaine, I said, can we have that song every week? Because I want that song we sang about, I'm there. You're there for me. And so it is. God bless you all.